Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy beans, and welcome back to the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. It's a surprise return for side quest. I know I haven't done a side quest in a long time. But I wanted to bring it back. For anybody who doesn't know, anybody who joined during season 2, side quest was a thing that I did at the beginning of me doing a podcast, and it was basically a way to. So I used to do two sort of episodes a week, basically. So you'd have the main quest, which would be the longer form, sort of more in-depth sort of episodes, and a side quest would be a little short thing that would be under 20 minutes, where I'd go into sort of not as much detail on something that I liked over a book, or what I ended up using them for were like Book of Boba Fett and Moon Knight episodes and that sort of thing. And eventually I just got burnt out by doing so many episodes per week that I just decided that I'd just do main quests instead. But I always had wanted to bring side quests back. I just couldn't find a topic that I could talk less about than I normally would. But I finally found one. But before we get into that, I just want to say, if you're not following me yet, make sure that you are on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod for updates and anything and everything that I will be doing, watching, playing, talking about, and all that sort of stuff on there. Also, if you are listening on YouTube, or if you're not, you can find the Nerdstalgic podcast on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and all that jazz. There will be a pinned comment at the top of this, below this episode, so that you can reply there if you don't know what to say on your own. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the Rapture, Bioshock Rapture, which is a book set before. So it's a prequel novel, which is set before the events of Bioshock 1 and 2. But before I get into that, before I get into the exciting thing, I just kind of wanted to explain as the reason as to why we're doing today's topic. And I would say it's kind of an interesting one. So, as some of you might be aware, the Super Mario movie, the new one, not the original early 90s version, the new one with Jack Black and Chris Pine, and Peaches, 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 Peaches. We all know that song. It's stuck in my head. I didn't even watch the movie, but that song is stuck in my head now because it's everywhere. It's such a tune. But as some of us might know, that on the 5th of April, 2023, the Super Mario movie was released, and is doing really well. It's won loads of awards, well, not awards yet, but like it's broke loads of records, and I'm sure it will win loads of awards when we get around to awards season near the end of the year. But because this is one of those sort of video games to movie successes, because we don't have many of them. You know, of all the years that I've been alive, there's not been many sort of great transitions from game to screen. Which, funny enough, it's the same from book to screen. There's not many great ones. There's only a few you could really mention. And it started off a debate, you know, not just on Twitter, but on YouTube and Reddit, that what should be the next big sort of topic, what should be the next thing, the next movie, video game sort of time that they should look into. You know, and you had people said the obvious, you know, some people said Gears of War, and, you know, people want to bring Doom back, and, you know, loads of other different things. I said I'd like to see a Donkey Kong, a Donkey Kong movie would be great, but me personally, I'd like to see a Banjo-Kazooie. I thought that you could do a lot with Banjo-Kazooie in that world, and the little widgets and all that. I think that would be really cool to do. You know, there was quite a good list, and I think I saw it on Twitter. Dan from Casting Views, he commented on one of these threads because I was reading through, and he mentioned a game series that really sort of made me think. And I can't remember what the quote was entirely, but he basically said that he wanted a Bioshock movie, but he wanted a movie that took place before the events of the first game, and that the events of that film should be the rise and fall of Rapture. And it made me laugh and it made me giggle because it's like I sat there and I read that and I went, I want to see that too. But then I thought, well, technically I've already seen it. I've read it. And I looked at my shelf and I'm like, well, I've got the book. And you can't see it, but I'm currently holding the book in my hand. And I thought to myself, yeah, I already know that story. I've already read it. And then I started to think about it. Of like, well, I want to look into Bioshock. I want to do a huge sort of retrospective on the Bioshock series. What would be a good way of beginning that journey by talking about something that is set before that? And I'll be honest with you, I was trying to think of a way to break into Bioshock because I didn't want to just jump straight in. I wanted to kind of ease in gently. And it took me a while to try to think of, well, how can I bridge in this sort of topic? And then it hit me in the shower, basically, why don't I talk about the idea of movies, video games to movies, and how that, why I feel that if they were to make a movie of Bioshock, they should base it off this book. And that's the idea of this topic, and that's what I'm going to try my best to convey here in this side quest. But before I do that, I do also want to mention a couple of films that have been based on video games, and that some have done very well, some haven't. But there's a lot of, I wouldn't say saturation in the market, but there's a lot of movie tie-in sort of films and games that actually have, some have done quite well, and some I'd like to see done again. So we've got like the Super Mario movie from the 90s, Double Dragon, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Lara Croft, Resident Evil, Doom, Alone in the Dark, Blood Rain, Silent Hill, Far Cry, Max Payne, Tekken, Prince of Persia, Hitman, Warcraft, Assassin's Creed, which I watched that this year, which was so confusing. That movie, just I don't know what that movie was trying to be. Sonic the Hedgehog, Werewolf Within, Uncharted, Five Nights at Freddy's, Days Gone, which is to be confirmed, which they're going to do that. But there's been absolutely loads. There's been animated ones as well. Ratchet and Clank got an animated movie. There was meant to be a Sly Cooper film, but they didn't do it. So there's been a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of people have tried to do them. And I know that Netflix has announced that they're going to be doing a Gears of War. I think it's a movie or series. I'd be happy with either one of them. But with Gears of War, if they are to make a Gears of War film, I want E-Day. I want Immersion Day. I want to see what happened during the Immersion Day. Show me the Pendulum Wars. Show me the end of the Pendulum Wars. Everything, the calm peace. We finally beat the URL. I think it is URL or UIR. I think it's UIR. Anyway, we've beat the enemy. The Pendulum War is finally over. It's time to relax. It's peaceful. And then all of a sudden, Immersion Day, the locusts pop. Boom. You know what I mean? I want to see that. I want to see a little bit of the Pendulum Wars, or even just the Pendulum Wars. That would be interesting. That's quite deep. If you've read the comic books or you read any of the beginning sort of novels, you know how sort of hardcore the Pendulum Wars were. But if they were to do, I want to see a bit of the Pendulum Wars, and then show me E-Day, and then show me sort of what leads up to where we get to in the first Gears of War game. I think that's what they should do. I feel like a lot of video game sort of movies should do that. They should show you stories that you haven't seen in game. Don't retell the same story. Tell me a prequel or a sequel. You know what I mean? Show me what happens before or after. I don't need to see what happened during because I've already played it. I've lived it, experienced it, done. And I feel like coming back to Bioshock, I feel like if they tried to remake the first game, I don't think it would work. Because Bioshock, in Bioshock, the game, the first game, and it's somewhat still the same in the second game, but in the first game, me personally, and I'll get into this when I get round to my proper retrospective, when I properly deep dive into the game, but my internal sort of opinion, after playing the games multiple times, and after being literally enthralled in this world and I used to dream about Rapture. Generally, this is true. I used to dream about going into Rapture all the time. Writing an essay for it, when I was in university, all this stuff. From my opinion, from doing a deep dive into Bioshock and playing it and just loving it all these years, I don't believe that there is anything that you could say is a main character in Bioshock. If anything, the only main character in Bioshock is Rapture. Rapture is the corpse. It is a living, breathing city that's on literally life support. And you as Jack, you as the main character, if anything, you are not the main character. You are the Grim Reaper, if anything. The best way I like to think of it is your character is Jack, you are the Grim Reaper. You are called back to Rapture because Rapture is dying. You are to basically you see Rapture at the end. Your job is to basically witness, to be an observer to the end of Rapture. And yes, you might have a sort of hand in taking down Ryan and taking down Atlas and all that jazz, but the only main character in Rapture is Rapture itself. It's a living, breathing world city. It's a being. It's a vessel. It breathes. And the splicers are viruses. They're bacteria that are destroying this beautiful creature. This beautiful inhabitants. And then you've got the brain, which is Andrew Ryan. He runs everything. He's the brain. He's the sort of trying to, shall we say, sort of, pick out sort of, as he says, the communists and the FBI and the CIA and all that sort of jazz. And he's trying to pull all that out, and he's trying to take the poison out, and the poison that he believes is infecting the body of his grand design is Atlas, is Fontaine. So you are just kind of a vessel of seeing these sort of entities go at each other. And I feel like in a film, you could still tell a pretty good story if you was to follow the games. But I feel like the games, again, this is the beauty of the medium of video game, is the fact of you can tell a story, an interactive story, in a way that you couldn't in film. You know what I mean? And you could only really do it if you was to either play it or used either to read it. The whole idea of would you kindly and all that and mind control, it all works in that medium. And in a film, I don't think it'd work. So like I feel if they was to go back in time and show me the rise and fall of Rapture, that would be a good tie-in. Because the way they could do it is the movie comes out, they tell this story, and then once the story's been told, then you can be like, well, if you want to know what happens next, go play the games. And that's what it should be. And I've said this many times, the extended media should bolster up what's already there. So what's already there are the games. Right, so whatever media you do next, whether it be a comic book or a novel or a film, it should bolster what's already there. It shouldn't try to remake the cake. It shouldn't have to remake the recipe. Take what's already there. You've already got a solid foundation in this book. Take this book, build off this foundation, either do it completely verbatim or change things at will, because I know that a book to movie is difficult because each page is 1 minute of screen time, and this book is 1 second. Let me scroll through. This book is 470 pages, which is 470 minutes, and that's a long movie, so they'd have to condense it and take things out. But the foundations here, all you have to do is build off of it. Like Rapture itself, when it built off the bedrock of the ocean, all you've got to do, the foundations are there, all you've got to do is build. If you build it, they will come. It's as simple as that, right? So that is sort of the introduction, if anything. The next part is me basically diving deep into the book and trying to explain my reasoning behind it, like what the story that this book tells, why it's interesting, why it would be better to follow this story than to actually remake the games into a film. Even though I know that would look good, I don't want to see it because I've already seen it. I want something new and something that other people haven't experienced. And this book, even though it's a fantastic book, it's one of my favourite video game novels ever, not many people have read it, and there's a lot of people who are a fan of Bioshock who didn't even know it existed. Right, so this is here today, me trying my best to kind of not just explain why they should make it into a movie, but also why, if you love this series, you really should read this book, right? So that's going to be my job today in the side quest. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Bioshock Rapture by Bram Stoker award-winning author John Shirley. Right, I'm going to read you the back of the book, read you the blurb. It was the end of World War II. FDR's New Deal had refined American politics. Taxes were at an all-time high. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had created a fear of total annihilation. The rise of secret government agencies and sanctions on businesses had many watching their backs. America's sense of freedom was diminishing, and many were desperate to take that freedom back. Among them was a great dreamer, an immigrant who'd pulled himself from the depths of poverty to become one of the wealthiest and most admired men in the world. That man was Andrew Ryan, and he believed that great men and women deserved better. So he set out to create the impossible, a utopia free from government, from censorship, and from moral restrictions on science. Where what you gave was what you got, he created Rapture, the shining city below the sea. But this utopia suffered a great tragedy. This is the story of how it all came to be and how it all ended. What a fantastic sort of blurb. What a fantastic sort of introduction to this story. That even if you'd never heard of Bioshock, even if you've never didn't even know it was a video game and you just went to the bookstore and picked this up, that would grip you. That would pull you in. Absolutely fantastic. One of the best sort of blurbs ever, right? So, this book was released on July 19th, 2011 by John Shirley. In tandem with working with Ken Levine, who was the main sort of creator, main writer of the Bioshock story and games. On July the 17th, 2009, in an interview with Game Shora, creator-director Ken Levine indicated that he was working on a novel set in Rapture with writer John Shirley. He went, and I quote, "I'm working on the Bioshock novel being done with a writer named John Shirley, and I'm going to just sort of peek my nose in and write the prologue and the epilogue of that, and I'm sitting down to write it, and it's like, oh, I can just write about Tenenbaum. I can just say what she's saying, and she can talk, and the audience may not go off and like shoot her in the head while she's saying it." End quote. The novel was originally planned to coincide with the release of Bioshock 2, 7 months later in February 2010. However, it was reported in January 2011 that the publication date was moved to March 1st, 2011. 1 month later, the date was published back to July 19th, 2011. On May 6, 2010, Levine reported being excited about receiving a new draft of the novel. On February 10th, 2011, Kevin Levine announced that he had finished writing the foreword of the book. So a lot went into writing this book, right? John Shirley himself left an author's note and quote, "This novel is a dramatization of the backstory of Bioshock and Bioshock 2. It is essentially a prequel to the events of the first two Bioshock games. It incorporates information I gleaned in playing the games through several times and in consulting with designers, online sites, books, interviews. I also poured over background and timeline materials provided for me by 2K and Tor Books. The tale you hold in your hand begins shortly after Rapture was first conceived and carries on through Rapture's civil war into 1959. The main characters and some minor characters from Bioshock are to be found here. Characters from Bioshock 2, like Sophia Lamb and the Wales brothers and even Delta, as well as settings and historical details from Bioshock 2 are also incorporated. While we sometimes leap several years from one chapter to the next, the story's arc is unmistakable and is close as possible to the tale that emerges in the audio diaries, public address announcements, and radio conversations found in the game. It also incorporates consistently provided by Ken Levine, though the consequences enough of Sarah Rosa. I drew terminology, large events, and characters from the game, but invented a certain amount of connective story and character backgrounds. I created 3 new characters as required in the composition of a novel, but never knowingly contradicted Bioshock, as suggested by Ken Levine. The narrative chief protagonist is Bill McDowell. Most of the narrative threads begun in this book are resolved by its final. A few are resolved within the games themselves. I was very pleased to be involved in adapting this unique, artfully designed game and world. So that was a quote by John Shirley. Absolutely fantastic sort of quote. It narrows down completely what this world's about. This book is a prequel story. It's set way before the events of the first game. It actually begins, if I open the book now, it begins in prologue. So the prologue begins on Fifth Avenue in New York in 1945, where you got to meet Sullivan, who was the chief of security, which I'll get in a minute to talking about him and the rest of the characters. But it does a great job of setting up of the idea of what behind this book. As for the synopsis, I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I reject those answers. Instead, I choose something different. I choose the impossible. I choose Rapture. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small, and with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well. It was the end of World War II. It's just perfect. Chef's kiss. So I'm not going to get into this book that much. I was going to talk about the prologue and the sort of first sort of few, I'd say about 2 chapters, right? So this book is set into parts. So you got the prologue, you got part 1, and if I believe correctly, it's about 3 parts of story, and each one has about sort of 5 to 6 chapters in each, right? So I'm just going to talk about the first part and the prologue and about 2 chapters in that, and then sort of I'll leave the rest to kind of be explored yourself, right? But from the prologue and from the first 2 chapters, you can kind of get an idea of what this story is about, right? So as for the prologue, in New York City, 1945, Andrew Ryan, a successful businessman, receives a report from his chief of security, Sullivan, who is a character you don't meet in the games, but if you collect the audio diaries within the first Bioshock game, you get a bit of an idea of who this bloke is. But this gives you a bit more backstory of who Sullivan is and the role he played in sort of from the beginning of the Rapture to basically his demise. So, his chief of security, Sullivan, and the terrifying results of the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima by the United States. Convinced of the impending doom of civilization, Ryan shares with Sullivan a project he had been designing in secret to enable escape from an atomic war. With all the preparations done, employing researchers, sending surveyors, and picking a spot, Ryan is ready to start building this grand work. Remembering the exile with his father from Russia and communist prosecution, Ryan dreams of what will be a fortress against the madness of the men in power, dedicated to freedom, called Rapture. Now, what I love about this prologue, and why I think it'd be so good for sort of the introduction to this story, is that even though Rapture is a living creature and is the main character of the Bioshock games, really, especially the first one, you have to have an archetype. You have to have a sort of leading figurehead. You have to have a character who can best relate to you as to the reasons as to why this city was built in the first place. And in that, we have Andrew Ryan. Now, Andrew Ryan is a fascinating character because what I love so much about Andrew Ryan is that in this book, Andrew Ryan shares with the reader a memory of him fleeing Russia in 1918, which involved sort of the death of his uncle. And from there, the idea was that we're going to flee Russia, that we're going to make our way to America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, that real sort of American image that they still have today, which is the idea if you come to America, you'll be free. We're the only free state in the world, which is not true, that every country is free. Well, almost every country is free. America's not the only free country, but they like to tell everybody that they are. But the idea was, especially at the beginning of the 20th century, was that come to America, new life, new beginning, you can do whatever you want. And for somebody who is an immigrant coming from another country, like Andrew Ryan is, and that's a fantastic thing to look into, and that'd be an amazing sort of story to tell there as well. But Ryan came to America with the idea of that I'm going to come here and I'm going to be free. I can do what I want. Only to get to America and to realize sanctions. You can't do this. You can't do that. If you make money, you have to declare everything that you're making. You've got to declare what you're spending. You've got to do this. You got to do that. There's rules. There's regulations, and also that the government, they run everything and they get themselves rich and everybody else is poor, and basically you just got to look at how the world is today, and you can kind of see why Ryan basically was like, well, they've dropped the bomb, they've dropped two big bombs on Japan, wiping countless of lives out. When would they want to do that again to us? What happens if we step out of line, or us powerful, we get to a point where the government goes, that's it, we're dropping the bomb. Now, obviously, you could say this is an idea of Ryan being paranoid, but it's very much an interesting case study where you look into Ryan and you're like, well, he has a point. You know what I mean? Like, he's come to this country. He wasn't brought up here. He was brought up with the idea, with the belief of like you're coming from a bad place to a good place, and that the place you're going to is going to be a lot better, that you're going to be free. That Ryan grew up being told he's going to be free, freedom awaits. The whole sort of being able to do what you want, say what you want, go where you want, because he lived in oppression all of his life up until he managed to escape, only to get him to realize that's not true. And Ryan, again, you've got to think a character who's been brought up with that idea, that concept, and now has the means and has the money and has the resources to actually make that dream a reality, and well as seen that the way the world is, and that the world above ground is not great, is not perfect, it's fallible. Nobody's in real control. The government's in control of everything. You can't blame Ryan for going, I'm going to go build my own city, and it's going to be me who runs it. I'm not going to allow the FBI, I'm not going to allow the communists, the Soviets, I'm not going to allow anybody to tell me what I can and can't do. It's my city. I've got the money. I've got control. I'm going to do what I want. It's a fantastic prologue. There's many ways they could do it. They could start it as the book starts, where you have Sullivan, who receives this information from his contact, and he makes his way to Andrew Ryan, and he tells Ryan this. Or you could set it of Ryan, a young Ryan, trying to flee Russia during the 1918, and his uncle dying, and how that affects him. And then you could jump to basically 1945, and to see a grown-up Ryan who is now a billionaire. He's top of the world. He's got all these companies, and he basically decides it's my time to go. And that could be your introduction, and that could be a fantastic sort of. I can just visual it now. It would look gorgeous, because Bioshock is gorgeous. It is very much, the swinging 20s. Very good singing 20s. Swinging 30s, it's very that art style, that sort of depiction. It's absolutely gorgeous. When you've got to remember, Ryan went underwater around about the 40s, 50s, and he didn't change, so his art style was still the same. It never changed. So everybody else on the top soil changed with the 50s and 60s. He kept that 40 aesthetic, and I think it works fans, and that's why this makes Bioshock so beautiful. But I'm going off a bit. But you learn more about Ryan in this sort of prologue, and as the story goes on, you learn more about him as well. You realise actually Ryan's not a bad guy. The Ryan that you see in the film, the Ryan that you see in the game, he's lost his marbles. He's gone at this point. But when you meet him in the game, he's just a man who was brought up with the idea of freedom, realised that there's no such thing as freedom, really, and that he's decided that he is going to take control of his life and his destiny, and that he's going to do what they couldn't do. And that was the birth of Rapture. That's all what Rapture was meant to be. It was meant to be something that we couldn't do. But he wanted to prove that you could do it. And I'll talk about it more when I get around to my actual sort of deep dive into Bioshock, into the game. But as this book shows, you give people too many freedoms, and things start to fall apart. Because how can you regulate what everybody's doing? If you allow everybody to do whatever they want, how can you regulate that? Free will is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with free will, but you've still got to have a bit of oversight to make sure that if somebody's doing something that is, shall we say, inhumane, you should be able to go, I'm not telling you what to do, but maybe you shouldn't do that. But then again, it's that freedom. It's that fact of, well, I should be able to do what I want. And when you set a society under those lines, you're setting yourself to fail. And then you throw Atlas in the mix of that, who literally was like a wrench, threw a wrench in the works, and it just watched it all crumble. So it's absolutely, that itself, that concept of a free society, it would be a fantastic idea for a movie in itself, right? So part one, the first age of Rapture. So I'm going to do the first two chapters, right? So in chapter one, in New York City, 1946, Bill McDowell, I always feel like I pronounce his last name wrong, who is actually a character you somewhat meet, but you don't meet. If you listen to any of the audio files in the first Bioshock game, you'll hear about his story. This is a quote from one of those audio diaries that you can find in the game. Ryan nationalized Fontaine Futuristics. He owns it now. Lock, stock, and barrel. For the good of the city, he says. He'll break it up in dull time. He says, I've resigned from the council and lodged me a letter of protest, but that's just pissing in the wind. It'll be a war, I say, unless somebody stops Ryan, and right fast. Bill McDowell, the general contractor in Rapture under Andrew Ryan, was a man of strong hands and a stronger Cockney accent. A well-meaning man who believed in the promise of Rapture. He provided much of the expertise and labour necessary to build the city. McDowell is also the protagonist of the novel Bioshock Rapture. Bill is a fantastic character. He's a fantastic character. It was a fantastic idea of actually having this guy as the main sort of lead of the character, because you have to remember, and what I'll go into in a minute when I talk about the chapter, Bill was a contractor. Bill was brought on by Andrew Ryan to help build his city, to help sort of funnel his vision. So you had Ryan, who is the sort of originator. He came up with the idea of Rapture. He designed it. He planned it, right? But he needed Bill as basically a mouthpiece to funnel that dream, to funnel that vision, to make it into reality. Bill knew the people, had the contractors, did all the sort of the work, was involved in bringing Rapture to life. If anything, Bill is as much as the father of Rapture as Ryan is. And he's a fantastic protagonist and main character for this story, because through Bill's eyes, we get to see not just the beginnings of Rapture, but we get to kind of see what's going on in Ryan's head. Bill gets unprecedented access constantly to Ryan. He's on the board of Ryan Industries, of Rapture. He's able to talk to Sullivan to see what's going on. He also, because he's the head contractor, he gets to go to places that other people can't go. So when the splicers start coming out and people start getting addicted to Adam, he gets a front row seat to seeing what it does to people. The benefits of Adam, how it made things easier and jobs better, but how people started to lose their minds. Through Bill, you get to see who Ryan is and who Ryan turns into and how he becomes the Ryan that we know in the games. But also we get to see how the city was built, what went into building the city, what it means to build such a huge city and how to keep it running, but also how it affects the people, how the people came in and how that changed them. It's a fantastic sort of deep dive into the character of a builder, of somebody who is now sort of the focal piece, the mouthpiece for Andrew Ryan, because Ryan became a recluse, basically. Once Rapture was built, he stopped being shown. He was like Willy Wonka. He came out like, I built this amazing place, here's all the wonderful things that you can do, and then he goes into hiding, especially when sort of Atlas sort of takes over, Fontaine comes in. You see less and less of him, to the point of the only people that have access to him are Bill and Sullivan, and even then to the point they lose access to him completely because Ryan becomes completely paranoid. But anyway, so part one, the first stage of Rapture, Chapter 1. In New York City, 1946, Bill McDowell, a freelance plumbing contractor, is sent to do maintenance work on the bathroom of a recently built penthouse apartment atop the Andrew Ryan Arms on Park Avenue. He is noticed by the owner, Andrew Ryan, when he starts replacing the tin-plated fillings with brass, rebuilding it to a better quality at his own cost. Ryan is impressed by the plumber's honest craftsmanship and sense of initiative, traits that they both share, and sends his man Sullivan the next morning to offer McDowell a job at his new building as his new building engineer. So that's chapter 1. So that we get a good introduction to who Bill is and the idea that Bill he shares ideas with Andrew Ryan, that he is somebody who, again, the sweat of my brow, I will go above and beyond. I will, don't mind if I lose money. I just want to do a good job. He's an hard-working, honest man, and not just that, he's Cockney as well. He's not American. He's also sort of an immigrant from his home country to America. He came here because the work was meant to be good, because there was meant to be freedom, because there's meant to be able to do whatever you want, and only to get here and to find there's actually you can't do this job, you can't do that job, you have to do this job, and all this kind of stuff. And Andrew sees this in him and is like, well, come work for me. I will give you a better life. I will give you the freedom to create, the freedom to basically build the impossible. I want you to help me to build Rapture. Again, it's a fantastic introduction. And like I said, because they shared this sort of these traits with each other, that kind of gives a better insight and a closer relationship between these two characters. So we get to see Ryan more, because that's what you want. You want to know more about Ryan. And also you get to, the interactions that Bill has with the other characters as well. Also, he's kind of like, again, he's like you. Bill is his own character, but Bill is also you as the watcher, as the reader. You are meeting these characters technically for the first time. This is the first time any of them have been introduced to each other. And you get to know who they are, where they begin, what they once are, why they came to Rapture, why they decided to do what they do, and all that jazz. It works so perfectly. So Chapter 2. In Chapter 2, in New York 1946, Sullivan goes to the docks to inspect the Olympian, the largest of 3 ships Ryan brought for his secret North Atlantic project, and being filled with prefabricated parts. He meets there with Reuben Greeley, head engineer for the Wales brothers, the architects commissioned by Ryan for his plans, and both men discuss the project, how Ryan gathered the means for it, as well as its attraction of praying eyes such as government agents. Greavy's voices the same concerns as Ryan of a world divided by the United States and the Soviet Union, and trust in Ryan's need for secrecy for this project. Meanwhile, a rising con man going by the name of Frank Gorland takes over the Clanger, a bar, from its owner, Herv Merton, after cheating him over a loan. Gorland then employs the boxing setup at the bar, but mostly uses it to gather information from his customers. One day he receives a visit from Voss, an FBI agent who asks him questions about things happening on the docks, mention the North Atlantic project backrolled by Ryan, and millions of dollars of materials being sent out to sea. Working to find out more and a way to eventually profit from this secret operation, Gordon learns a few days later from a grieving woman about the death of her lover, Ivy. Employed by the seaworthy construction on underwater construction for Ryan, Gorland's efforts finally pay off when he locates the Olympian and makes one of the ship's deckhands spill the beans, discovering the ship's use in supplying construction of an underwater colony in the Atlantic. So Frank Gorland, it's a bit of, well, not really spoilers, but Frank Gorland is Fontaine. Or should I say, Frank Gorland Fontaine is Atlas, right? Or would you kindly? For anybody who's played the games. What I love about this character is that you never really find out, because he's a con man, right? He's a snake in the grass. He never stays anywhere for long. He's a shadow broker. He deals in secrets and stuff like that. So he's never in one place at one time. He's like the Joker. He never has any fixed name. You never know who he really is. He's a ghost, really. And Fontaine, as a con man, or Gorland, should I say, he's always looking for a new sort of adventure, a new way to either con people out of money or a new way to kind of make him money. And that's why he deals in secrets. So when he figures out that Ryan is doing something out to sea, he wants to get involved. And again, this is sort of the introduction of how Fontaine got involved with Rapture and how he found his way to Rapture and how he started Fontaine technologies and how that sort of grew and how the war started there, the civil war between Andrew Ryan and Fontaine. And like, I won't spoil it, but the idea between how Fontaine became Atlas is incredibly fascinating. And one, even though I'd played the games and I'd listened to all this voice diaries you can find throughout the game, even though that I knew that eventually there was going to be a switch between each character, I just didn't see it coming in the story. So it's absolutely fantastic, right? And you meet Tenenbaum, you meet Dr. Suchon, you meet Sophia Lamb, you meet all these sort of different characters. And you get to know them, you get to find out why they're there. And then when they first find the sea slugs, when they're exploring down there, and how they make the big daddies, and how the atom was made, and how Adam is affecting the people. Everything about the story just works to build up the idea that Rapture is a utopia, but it's a heaven that you can't leave. You know what I mean? And it eventually goes from heaven to hell very quickly. Because one thing that Ryan didn't tell anybody, he invited people specifically, scientists and artists and creatives, people he wanted to share in his vision with him, who wanted to be free to create. What he didn't tell them was that once you're in Rapture, you're there for life. You can't leave. You know what I mean? And that sparked up a civil war. Because a lot of people were like, well, hold on a second, I only came here to work. I didn't come here to live forever. I want to eventually go meet my family. But Ryan's like, well, nobody can leave. You can come in one way, but you can't leave because I don't want to risk anybody leaving and telling all my secrets or telling people where Rapture is or risk the FBI or the Soviets or any sort of agency coming down here and trying to regulate and tell he can't do things and all this jazz. Ryan doesn't want, again, he starts getting paranoid. And this is where the story starts getting interesting because Ryan's paranoia gets so bad at one stage that it gets to the point where you can't leave, no one can leave. So you have to imagine you've got this boiler keg of people who are potentially terrified, who are being threatened with prison and death, right? Because they can't leave. You can't blame them for going, well, I need something to kind of deal. I'm going crazy. I'm going manic. And then, Adam is brought in where you can have superpowers, where you can, from the click of your fingers, you've got light, you've got fire, and you've got electricity, and you can, have telekinesis and all that kind of stuff. The idea of that is fantastic, and it makes work easy. It makes life bearable, but eventually it gets very addictive, and you need more, and people start going crazy, as well as then you having civil war that is sort of started. And I won't say how or why or by who, but there's a civil war that started. There's a big war between sort of Ryan Industries and the police and, Sullivan. And then there's sort of, you've got Fontaine on his side as well. And you've got Fontaine being a smuggler and bringing things in and making things harder for Ryan and his people. And it was all just, honestly, Rapture was a powder keg ready to explode. It was a good idea at first, and that's all it really should have been. It should have been an idea. It should have been a sort of thought experiment. It should never have been a reality. And this book shows the fall of that. It shows the rise and how it was beautiful. It was wonderful how everybody was excited. The idea of we're going to build a utopia and it's going to be ours and we can do what we want and it's going to be gorgeous. It's going to be beautiful. That is lovely. And then you have the golden age, which doesn't last very long. But then you have the golden age of Rapture where everything is perfect. Everything is running smoothly. Everybody's happy because everybody can do what they want. There's no rules. The only rule is you cannot leave. That's about it, right? You can do whatever you want. You can research whatever you want. You can paint. You can say whatever. Free speech. Go have it, right? but that only can go for so long, because eventually there are going to be people who don't agree with you or don't agree with what other people are saying, and that's going to cause conflict, and that's going to cause arguments, and that's going to cause debate, which then causes, again, troubles and fighting and death. And then you add in Adam, and you add in people who've got superpowers now, and now people are getting addicted, and now people are going crazy, and people are killing each other, and quickly that golden age starts to go down, down, down. And again, the shit's hit the fan, the city's going down, nobody can leave, everybody's stuck. So it's either have Atom and become a splicer, become a psycho, like go off your head and become addicted to this drug, or don't use it and slowly, sink into the void of madness and die, because you can never leave. Um, it's a fantastic story. Like I said, it really ties in Bioshock 1. It ties in Bioshock 2 as well. It brings in characters like Sophia Lamb, like Delta. The whole idea behind the Big Daddy, the whole idea behind Would You Kindly, and Dr. Suchan, and the Little Sisters, and everything is wrapped up so neatly in a nice little bow for this book that generally by the end of it, I felt like I knew more. I felt like I was a part of Rapture. I felt like I was there. Because I've seen it. I've had the luxury of hindsight. I've had the luxury of going to Rapture. I've walked in the halls. I've seen the decay, the destruction. To seeing what has happened to Rapture, what's happened to its people. I've had the luxury of hindsight. And to be able to go back and to see how and why, why the city was built, how the city crumbled. And that sort of, for me, after I read this book, gave me a lot more sort of clarity of who the main character of the first game is, and is the reason why I say Rapture is the main character. Rapture is a character. It's a living, breathing world. It's a living, breathing symbiote sort of consciousness, and that if Rapture goes, the people go. And the people that are left are the viruses, they're the poison, they're the bacteria. And it's all being run by Andrew Ryan, who is the brain, who is running this city into the ground, into the bedrock, into the ocean. And then you've got Atlas, who is trying to take back control, you know. And it tells you how that happened. Because when you play Bioshock for the first time, you don't know what's going on. All you know, which is one of the best sort of introductions to a video game ever, all you know is that you've planes crashed, you're in the sea, there's nothing around for miles, and you turn around, there's a lighthouse, and you go into the lighthouse, and there's a submarine, and you pull the lever, and next thing you know, you've been introduced to Andrew Ryan and his idea and concept of a utopia, of Rapture, and then you have this beautiful scene and sort of where you get to see this city that's underground, it's all lit up, that all the neon is looking gorgeous, looks beautiful, and you're like, this looks like the Emerald City. It's like Oz. It looks gorgeous. And then you finally get into it and you think, well, everything's going to be fantastic, everything's going to be perfect, this place looks beautiful, this looks gorgeous, this is a utopia. Only to go in and to actually realise this place is no longer the shining beacon of hope that it used to be. And to get there and to be attacked by splicers, to see that this place has gone downhill, and to slowly, as the game unravels, you slowly start to learn, and as you go to different sections of Rapture, you get to see the carnage, you get to see the death, the destruction, you get to see the different splicers. Some of them have still got their marbles, some of them, their bounce has gone out of their bungee. You know what I mean? Some are still there, some are not there, some are not there completely, but are enough to be functioning, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And if you really take your time to look and to listen and to find the voice diaries, you can learn a lot more about the story. But Rapture, it's not a story, it's a story that you have to really embrace. You know what I mean? To really fully understand how this city fell, you have to embrace it. Whereas this book allows you to kind of sit back and take it all in from the beginning. And I believe, personally, that if they are to make a video game novel, this should be what they should use as a foundation. As I said at the beginning, even if they don't take it as verbatim, even if they decide to choose, like pick and choose and take things out and add things in, no matter what they decide to do, as long as they follow this Bible, as long as they follow this tome, this story of the beginning of Rapture from the beginning, middle, and end, I feel like it'd be a fantastic film, and it would bolster the game. As I said, like this book is a prequel. It sets up the beginning, it sets up the golden age, and it sets up the fall. And then it can be like, if you enjoyed the film, go play the game. And now with hindsight, you can go into Rapture. Now, some people would argue saying, well, you should go into Bioshock for the first time not knowing anything. And I agree. I still one wholeheartedly full agree with that. But if you was to play the games first, I mean, if you was to watch the film first and then play the game, which is, for example, my dad has never played The Last of Us, right? But he loved The Last of Us TV show. And now he's gone off and he's bought The Last of Us 1 and he's currently playing through it and he loves it. And even though he knows what's going to happen because he's seen the show, because the show is changes things and is somewhat different from the game, he feels like he's enjoying it more because he knows things, but also he's enjoying the bits that weren't in the film. You know what I mean? So I feel like that would be the same thing for a lot of people. Would be the fact of they watch the film, they enjoy it, they now play the game with that hindsight of how it, the rise and the fall of Rapture, and now they can go into the story of Bioshock and really delve into what happened to after. How many years has it been since the end of this book? You know, where are the characters that were stuck in Rapture? Where are they? Will I get to meet them? How are they different to what they were in the film or book or whatever? And like I said, everything of external media should do is bolster what's already there. So it be a film or TV show or film, it should bolster what's there. It should make you enjoy it more. You know, you shouldn't have to read the book to understand what's going on. It should be the fact of you understand what's going on, but if you want to know a bit more, you read the books, you listen to the you listen to the audio book, you watch the film, watch the TV show, whatever. Everything should bolster up the foundation, what's there. And I feel like this book does it fantastically. And if they follow this to the T, or even change things here and there, they cannot fail. And this would be I would love to say $1 billion franchise. Maybe not. But if they follow this story, I'm thinking 5 to 6 million. 500 to 600 million, maybe more, maybe even to the 700 million. Yeah, and not just that, they're already thinking about making another Bioshock game. It's already apparently an announcement that they're planning on doing the next Bioshock game. And Ken Levine is off making his next sort of Bioshock type sort of game. So those sort of stories, those sort of games and the way they work are already being in production, already being made. Also, you had Atomic Hearts that came out this year, which is like, I'm playing it and I'm loving it and I'm getting Bioshock vibes every time I play it. There's there is a need for it, and there is an upcoming sort of need for it. So if we're 2K, the people that own the series, and if they wanted to make a Bioshock story, this is what you base off. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to remake the games. Leave the games as they are. Copy this book. Done and dusted. Now, I know Guillermo del Toro was apparently on for a while of making a Bioshock movie. I would happily have del Toro still involved to do it. I don't know who they should cast as Andrew Ryan. I haven't really put much thought into it. Maybe when I do my deep dive into Bioshock, before I begin that sort of dive, I'll write up a list of who I think should play Ryan, who should play Bill and Atlas and Sullivan and Dr. Shuton and all that jazz. I'll put a list together. But yeah, I feel like if I had to pick a director, I'd happily go with Del Toro. Guillermo del Toro, I think, would do a fantastic job. He's already technically somewhat did it with The Shape of Water. If you watch The Shape of Water, you will get Bioshock vibes off that film. So yeah, I feel quite confident with this side quest. I feel like it's ran a bit longer than I would like it, so it's more of a main quest than side quest. But you know, I hope I've best conveyed this my proposition to you beans. I would definitely recommend going out and getting the book. It's Bioshock Rapture. It's by John Shirley. It's a fantastic read. If you're a big fan of Bioshock, definitely it's one you need to look into getting. If you've never played Bioshock, you know, I would say play the games first. But if you want sort of that sort of prelude, sort of find out what happened before, then by all means read the book. Definitely fantastic, definitely amazing, definitely worth having. It's one of my favourite video game novels, and I've read all the Mass Effect novels. I'm currently making my way through the Gears of War novels. I've got all the Dragon Age novels. I do love my video game novels, and this is the best of them all. So that's high praise. So yeah, also keep an eye out for my Bioshock retrospective. I'm taking a deep dive into the whole Bioshock series from Bioshock 1, Bioshock 2, and Bioshock 3, and all the DLC that's encumbered in them all. So that should be fun. I don't know when any of them will be released. As recording this, I haven't started any sort of recording or any planning of them. I just know I'm going to be doing them, and I'll be playing through the games soon. So this was just going to be a prequel thing. So even though I was recording this, I haven't got around to it. If I do it correctly and I have this out in a certain time, I will try my best to have this out, and that next week, the week after you hearing this, you'll be having the Bioshock game retrospective, and then it'll go from there. So I won't put this out now in April and then not look at Bioshock until, say, like May, the middle of May, June. That would be unfair. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to smartly sort of do this, where I'm going to keep this on hold for a bit. So when you're hearing this now, next week, hopefully you should be getting Bioshock, the retrospective. But for now, I'm going to have it on hold for a bit for myself. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you all liked it. There's not really any big ending to this, because I feel like I've gone on long enough, so I'm not going to do a big ending. What I will say is, if you liked it and enjoyed it, make sure, again, you follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, Audible, again, YouTube. If you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and all that jazz. It really, really helps out immensely. If you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to give me a star rating from 1 to 5 stars. 5 stars, best thing you've heard in your life. You completely agree with me and you feel like this is what they should really base a Bioshock movie on. Or 1 star, I'm talking rubbish and that they shouldn't make a Bioshock movie. Whatever you feel like is fair, 1 to 5 stars, please do let me know. Also, maybe write down in the comments what video game do you think should be made into a movie? You know what I mean? What do you think would work? Would you want to see a Bioshock movie? Would you want to see a Banjo-Kazooie movie? Would you like them to do, I don't know, what's something really, really crazy? A Qbert film. I don't know. Let me know down below. Alright, Beans, I have been your host, Luke. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. And as always, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. I love you all. Bye-bye. So here we are at the end of the first side quest of season 2. I hope you all liked it. I know I enjoyed it immensely, coming up with the topic and actually being able to talk about something that I feel quite passionate about, which is books and movies and putting them together. What did you think? Did you like it? Did you agree? Do you not agree? Do you want to see more side quests? Please do let me know on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. Or if you listen to this on YouTube, let me know down in the comments if you want to see more side quests. I'd like to do more of these small, shorter form sort of reviews in the future. But also, most importantly, do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you feel like Bioshock could be made into a movie, or do you think it should be a TV show? Or what other sort of video game to movie sort of potential films would you like to see? Do you think they should take another crack at the Doom franchise? Do you think they should do Spec Ops: The Line? Do you think they should have another go at making an Assassin's Creed movie? I know they already made an Assassin's Creed movie, but if you've seen it, it's not very good. Do you think they should take another crack at that, or do you think they should make an Assassin's Creed TV show? Whatever you feel they should do, or you feel they shouldn't touch, or anything like that. I want to hear it all. I want to start a dialogue. So again, let me know on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod, or let me know if you listen to this on YouTube in the comment down below. There'll be a pinned comment. Reply to that, and let's start a dialogue and let's have a conversation, because I'm really looking forward to actually seeing, what people feel should be made into a movie, what should be made into a TV show. Like they're doing a Fallout TV show, something I never thought they'd ever do, but they're making a Fallout TV show, and I'm really looking forward to it. From the trailer and from the stills that I've seen, it looks interesting. You've piqued my interest there. So I want to hear feedback from you beans. What do you feel they should and shouldn't do, and what games should be touched and what games shouldn't be touched. You know what I mean? So let's start a dialogue. Let's have a chat. But if you want to find this podcast, and if you enjoyed listening to me today, you can find this podcast on Spotify. You can find me on Anchor, which is now Spotify Podcasts. It's been renamed. You can find me on Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts. You can find me on Audible, as I mentioned as well, YouTube. And if you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to give me a star rating from 1 to 5 stars. It helps me out immensely. And if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Anybody you think who would like this, it helps me out immensely. Currently, as I'm recording this, I'm at 75 subscribers. My sort of main goal, hopefully, by the middle to end of summer, I wanted to see if I can get to 90 to maybe 95, and even really would be fantastic if we can get to 100 subs. So share and share alike, all that is going to be fantastic. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to do this episode, to talk about this topic. Next week we're going to be talking about Bioshock in depth, the first game. So I look forward to doing that one. I've got a lot of notes, and I haven't got around to recording it yet, so it's going to be fun to sit down and properly do a deep dive recording to that one. But until then, I have been your host, Luke the Human. I hope you're doing well. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I will catch you in the next one. All right, bye, beans.